there, and welcome to Personalization Point, Episode 1, the comprehensive encyclopedia of sales plays. My name is Becc Holland. I'm the CEO and founder of Flip the Script. Before we get going here, if you do me a small micro favor, go ahead and go to flipthescript.co and make sure that you download the deck and the PDF for this session. It is extremely dense and you need those before we jump into the video content. So once you've done that, let's go ahead and jump on in. Let's start with an agenda. So number one, I want to give everyone the roadmap. So from a graphical perspective, this is going to be one of the most dense sessions I've ever done in my career. So this is going to be a roadmap from a graphical perspective so you can understand what are the different buckets and where do they fit in. And then I'm going to go a little bit deeper into each one of these buckets. So number two, we're going to go into inbound. Number three, we're going to go into postbound. Don't worry, I'll give you definitions for each one of these categories and what they include. Number four, bridgebound. Number five, cold outbound. And then we're going to finish off with how do you pick out a personalized premise and how do you tie that into a one-to-many premise and what is a sequence infrastructure. So you're going to walk away with not only the roadmap for every single play that you can run, but how do I incorporate a relevance and personalization strategy or just a relevance only strategy to this entire roadmap. So let's go ahead and start with a roadmap. So the roadmap for this session, it's going to be a little bit smaller to read up here. You probably can't read it, but if you download this asset on the side of this session, you can have it right in front of you. But from a high level, this is everything that we're going to cover today. So let's break it down of what the different pieces of this map are. So the first thing I want you to pay attention to is over here on the left-hand side is going to be the graphical bar across the top of what level of inbound or outbound is this. So on the left-hand side of this sheet, you're going to see that it's very aggressively inbound. And then as we go progressively to the right, it's going to get more and more and more outbound. So that's the first thing to keep in mind, that those are the two approaches, and it's more so a moderate approach in the middle. The second thing I want you to pay attention to is the category groupings. So essentially over here on the far left, we have inbound. Like I mentioned, middle left, we have postbound. I'm going to skip over this midsection. Far right, we have cold outbound. And then middle right, which is going to be our biggest category, is going to be bridgebound. So I'm going to give you definitions for each one of these, and we're going to walk through each one of these plays and what they are. But essentially those are the four categories. So from a graphical perspective, far left is inbound, middle left is postbound, middle right is bridgebound, and far right is cold outbound. And again, you can use that bar to see which level of inbound to outbound it is. The definitions are going to be right under the headers. So essentially for inbound, you'll see the definition there, but basically this first line under each one of these categories is going to be the definition of what those leads are from a high level. The next line below that is going to tell you on this sheet whether the prospect should or shouldn't know your company in this case, because they're going to be different in each category. So for instance, far left, the prospect knows your company. Far right, we're positive or very, very likely that the prospect doesn't know your company. And middle left and middle right for postbound and bridgebound, sometimes they'll know your company. So we'll, again, go into this a little bit later in depth. But the next line, that is the graphical bar that is colored, is going to tell you what is the messaging strategy when it comes to personalization. So this PDF is going to be if you are deploying a personalization strategy. So for instance, for far left, for inbound, it's one-to-many messaging only. So if someone is coming in through an inbound line, then you don't essentially have to personalize to them. They're already coming to you. For postbound, it's going to be one-to-many messaging, which is relevance, along with one-to-one messaging, which is personalization. Bridgebound, same thing, one-to-many messaging of relevance, along with one-to-one messaging of personalization. And then over here on the far right, we're going to have one-to-one messaging only. So it's going to be personalization only. So that colored bar across the top is going to give you high level the messaging strategy. And then each one of the sequences that you can build, or each one of the plays that you can run, is going to be listed underneath each one of these categories. So that unpacks everything for the top bar. So again, in review, the top bar up here, we're going to have, is this inbound or is this outbound? And what is the level of aggression towards inbound or outbound? So we've got far left is inbound, far right is outbound. We've got each one of the category names under a line underneath that. So we have inbound, which is far left, postbound, which is middle left, bridgebound, which is middle right, and cold outbound, which is far right. A line underneath that, we have the definition for each one of these leads. A line underneath that will tell you whether the prospect should or shouldn't know your company in this case scenario, just so you have some background. The line underneath that will tell you what kind of messaging, if you are using a personalized messaging strategy for all four of these, where you would use personalized messaging, which is one-to-one premises, and where you would use relevance only, which is one-to-one. So inbound is one-to-many only. Postbound and bridgebound are one-to-many plus one-to-one messages. And then cold outbound is one-to-one only. And then underneath each one of these categories, you're going to have each one of the sales plays. So one more thing before we move into each one of these sales plays to note. Underneath bridgebound, there are going to be 4 different categories, which we'll go into later, but I just want you to view it from a graphical perspective. So whenever we transition into it, you can remember it, and you should have the PDF right in front of you. So there are 4 different categories for bridgebound. 2 of these categories. So the 4 categories are bridgebound based on relationship, bridgebound based on history, bridgebound based on symptoms, pains, and problems, and bridgebound based on an educated guess that they are in market. So for bridgebound based on relationship and bridgebound based on history, this bar right here will tell you that both of those categories will raise the likelihood that your prospect will take a meeting with you. But the right category for bridgebound based on pain, symptoms, and problems, and bridgebound based on educated guess that they're in market, those 2 will raise the likelihood that they will ultimately buy. So in the first case scenario, where it raises for bridgebound based on relationship and bridgebound based on history, increased likelihood that they will take a meeting, but you don't know if they have the pain that you solve for. You don't know necessarily if they have the problem that you solve for. They're just more likely to take a meeting. And then on the right, bridgebound based on symptoms, problems, and pain, and bridgebound based on educated guess that they're in market, it is an increased likelihood that they will ultimately buy if you do get a meeting with them, because they likely have the pain that your product solves for. So this is the graphical representation. I want you to keep the PDF in front of you as we go along here, because we're going to go really deep. But this is a good way to structure in your brain. You know, historically, people either said this is inbound or this is outbound. So this is going to be a good way to break this down for your reps, you know, so that they can understand, how do I incorporate a one-to-one strategy and a one-to-many relevance premise and book the most meetings possible. So all of these plays, some of them are SDR plays, some of them are account executive plays. If it's a full cycle account executive, it's, you know, clearly all the plays are theirs. But this is the exhaustive list of pipeline generating plays that you can do to get more meetings and get more deals across the line. So let's go ahead and jump back into the deck. So let's start with inbound. So inbound historically has had a lot of different plays underneath it as a header. And usually whenever I go to SDR reps and I say, you know, hey, you have a whole bunch of inbound here. You have chat box, you have inbound demo requests, you have content downloads, etc. You know, webinar registrants, event attendees, you know, how is all of that going? They always come back with demo request is true inbound and the rest of them aren't high quality leads. And what they mean by that is the buyer intent is lower. So it could be matched quality of leads in terms of it's a VP of sales over at Drift, you know, and it's a VP of sales over at Drift, meaning one requested a demo and one came in and downloaded content. But what they mean by high quality is the conversion is lower, because someone who comes in from a content download is very, very different in terms of buyer intent. So inbound, by definition, is going to be true hand raisers. So I'm going to get out of the way these words so you can read them. But true hand raisers, this is a group of people who is asking to see your product. There are only two plays for inbound, and this is going to be demo requests and prospects who use a chat box. So people who came in through Drift, an amazing tool, people who came to your website and said, I want to know more about your product, or people who requested a demo and said, I want to know more about your product. Those are the only two plays for inbound. So we're going to really split these out so that we can understand what is the different messaging strategy. So for inbound, you can truly use a one-to-many relevance messaging strategy only. So, someone who wants to see your product, you don't have to really, look up their profile and say like, hey, you wrote this article, etc. This is someone who's coming to you. This is a fish that's jumping in your boat, and your only goal at that point is, how can I quote unquote qualify this person, understand if they have, the right title, the right company, can they buy the product, and get them to the account executive as quickly as possible. I have a lot of thoughts on the inbound process, and I have worked with a lot of teams in terms of how do I turn this into more actual people who are seeing my demo, but also make sure that we aren't sending through unqualifieds. If you go to season 1, I do an entire session on it, on a demo request process that will help convert more prospects. So I would suggest watching that session. I just have to say that. But as far as inbound, you only have two sales plays. People who are requesting a demo and prospects who are coming in through the chat box. And that is a one-to-many messaging strategy only, that you can go relevance and you can use automation to do that. The second category, so again, inbound was far left, one-to-many strategy only. It's a very high level of inbound. The second category, which is middle left on the PDF, is going to be postbound. So let me tell you where the term postbound came from. So postbound in basketball, I watch a lot of NBA basketball. And in basketball, the position between the top of the key and the basket is called a post. So postbound is going to, by definition, be any non-hand-raising marketing leads. So I'm going to repeat that again. Any non-hand-raising marketing leads. So they wanted to download the content, etc. They wanted to get to know your company for some reasons. They know who your company is, but they didn't necessarily want to take a look at the product. So postbound is going to have 12 plays in total. Number 1, content downloads. It's, pretty cut and dry, people who downloaded your content. Number 2, webinar registrants, people who attended a webinar. Number 3, buyer intent leads. So buyer intent leads, there are third-party providers who basically enable current clients of a platform to leave a review. So third-party review is very, very strong. So Forrester did a report on all of the different things that people consider whenever they buy. And top 3 things that they consider whenever they're doing their research on a product is, number 1, they go peer-to-peer. They call their friends and ask what their friends, thought whenever they were using the product. Number 2, they go to industry influencers. And number 3, they go to third-party reviews. So G2 and Trust Radius are a couple of examples, of companies that basically collect third-party reviews from people who've used the product. And when someone goes to look at those reviews, they can essentially, to some degree, gate it. They can understand what company and what geo this person is coming from. And if you buy one of these platforms, if you buy a service through them, they can pipe back that intent back to you. So it would say, let's say that Drift is taking a look at, Flip the Script on G2. Then all of a sudden G2 can signal to me and say like, hey, someone over at Drift is taking a look at your product. So the third sales play that you can run if you have bought G2 or Trust Radius is that you can run a play based on that buyer intent. They not only help you look at who is looking at your actual platform, they can tell you who is looking at the space in general. Let's say of sales training and consulting in my case, or who is looking at your competitors. They can do all 3. So this third play is going to be if you have bought G2 or Trust Radius or third-party review provider, if you can, pipe those back into this play. Number 4, free trials if you are a freemium model. So for a lot of companies, this isn't necessarily going to be applicable. Today, I'm going to run through every single sales play that you can run. Some of them are going to apply and some of them aren't. But a free trial is going to be, let's say Slack, for instance. You go into the platform and it's a freemium model where they let you get into the platform, but they essentially choke back some of the functionality and you have to upgrade to go ahead and get that additional functionality released. So think Pandora is another great example. They run ads, so it's a freemium model, but if you want to get rid of those ads, then you have to essentially pay a upgrade process fee. Number 5, event attendees. So, right now it's virtual event attendees, but nonetheless, you get it. The 5th play is going to be people who attended your event. Number 6, followers on social. So, let's say flip the script on social, on LinkedIn, on Facebook and Instagram. Anyone who's following, flip the script on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram, I essentially could put them into a play. Number 7, people who interact with your company on social but aren't following. So there are a lot of people on the flip the script on LinkedIn who will, make some comments, like some posts or share some of the content, but they aren't actually followers. Number 8, blog subscribers. Number 9, newsletter, people who subscribe to your newsletter. Number 10, dark funnel. So dark funnel, before you think I just make up words all the time, dark funnel is people who are researching your product online who are not actually taking any action necessarily within marketing. So there are 2 providers. The primary 2 providers of this service of dark funnel, piping back dark funnel leads to you are 6sense and Bombora. But basically, they can understand from a high level if someone is researching you on Google, let's say, and people are doing more research than ever before because they want to delay that process of talking to a salesperson, they can pipe back to you from an intent level, hey, this company is researching you, and so it could be a good time to reach out. Number 11, high-value MQLs. So to anyone out there, an MQL is a marketing qualified lead, and usually in traditional lead scoring format, they will associate a certain amount of points for each one of these actions that I've just listed and say if they get over a certain amount of points or they're, even higher titles can be worth more points, then they would say, I'm going to turn this person into an MQL. I usually do away with traditional lead scoring and say, if an intern over at Oracle requests a ton of my content, it doesn't matter how much content that they download. Essentially, I don't want to reach out to that person. I don't want to book an intern because if I book that for my account executives, then they say, hey, this is someone, traditionally without budget, without influence, etc. Great from a brand awareness perspective, very, very valuable in terms of our brand, but not someone that we want to book a meeting with. Whereas a VP of sales over at Oracle, if they blink in my direction, I want to talk to them. So I did away with traditional lead scoring and basically put this to every single play of if they took one of these actions, I wanted to sequence them with an outreach. But a high-value MQL, the only way that would happen outside of these actions that I listed before is if you're sending an aggressive amount of marketing nurture emails and they're opening your marketing emails. And so it basically ticks them up and says, like, this person is an MQL. They didn't take any of these previous actions because I would have sequenced them there, but they open a lot of my marketing emails. And so I want to sequence them based on that. And then number 12 is going to be website views. So, if someone views your website, especially if you're using a great service like HubSpot, who I am actually using, then you can sequence them into your sequences and say like, okay, this person came to the website, so it increases the likelihood that they, potentially want to hear about my product. So again, in review, the definition of postbound is going to be marketing leads that are not hand raisers yet. So inbound is hand raisers, postbound is marketing, and they're non-hand raising leads. And there are 12 different plays that you can do underneath postbound. So now let's transition from middle left to middle right. And this is going to be bridge bound. Bridge bound, by definition, is a way for you to bridge into your prospects using a one-to-many relevance premise and also incorporating one-to-one messaging. So I am almost like nervous to pitch this content right now because I think of how meaty this has been for me with my teams. But bridge bound, essentially, it's a non-marketing lead, but it's a way to bridge into your prospects using a one-to-many premise, which is just relevance, and also incorporate one-to-one messaging. So again, in review, if you go back to the PDF and you look underneath a line, the lowest line underneath before you start the actual sequence names, there are 2 different buckets of bridge-bound premises, and then there are 2 categories underneath each bucket. So let's start with the first bucket. The first bucket in review is it's raising the likelihood that your prospect will take a meeting, but not necessarily that your prospect will buy, because you're not sure if they have the actual pain point that you solve for. So the first bucket we're going to go into is bridge bound based on relationships. So this is the weightiest bucket in terms of all the plays that you can run. So let's go ahead and jump in. Bridge bound based on relationship is going to be there's some level of relationship with you or someone at your company. So there's an increased likelihood that they will take a meeting because of that relationship. So think, golf course etiquette of like, we know each other somehow. So out of respect, I'm going to take this meeting. So let's go get into all the plays that you can run. So number 1 for bridge bound based on relationship, the companies that you are prospecting into that share a common VC with you. So let's say, for instance, Flip the Script is invested in by Bessemer Venture Partners. Bessemer, if you're watching, I'm well aware that you have not invested in my company. But Bessemer Venture Partners, let's say that they, invested money in Flip the Script, and I want to prospect into Twilio. And Twilio is also or PagerDuty, and PagerDuty is also backed by Bessemer Venture Partners. So we share a common VC. So the first play that you can run is all the companies that share a common VC, venture capitalist relationship with you. So for most companies, they have a multitude of different VCs. So this can be a really effective play because it can open up within the portfolio. Typically, portfolios want their other portfolio companies to use one another because it increases the likelihood that those companies do well. So this can be a strong play. Number 2 is common VC with your customers. So let's say, I had booked PagerDuty. PagerDuty bought from me, and they are invested by Bessemer Venture Partners. And then I would reach out based on that premise to all the other portfolio companies of like, hey, PagerDuty, shares a common VC with you, and they have purchased Flip the Script. And so, that is the whole play that I'm going to run. So I thought this was a weaker play, full disclosure, until I actually tried it. So I'm a big fan of, I'm going to try something, and if it works and, I didn't think it was going to be a great idea, then I'm going to be open-handed in terms of leave my ego at the door. This is a play I didn't think would work that well, and it worked insatiably well for my team. So seems a little bit like you're out on a limb, or at least from my view, but this can work really well, especially if you pattern in some pattern interrupt information. So play number 2 is they share a common VC with your customers. Play number 3 is a referral to the network of your happy customers. So if we are selling into companies and making them happy, then typically those buyers are going to have a lot of network. So if you have made your customer happy, which is step number 1, then typically they are willing and open to share that love with all of their network. So the third play you can run is referring into the network of your happy customers that you currently have. Play number 4 is inbound referrals from VC partners. So let's say I'm going to give them a shout out on this video. When I was working at Chorus, they were invested by Emergence Capital, and Doug Landis was one of those VC partners for Emergence Capital. So in play number 4, it would be Doug Landis, who is sending over a lead and saying like, hey, Becc, you need to talk to X, Y, and Z. This is my friend, and they are interested in maybe talking about Chorus. So in play number 4, it'd be Doug Landis sending me a lead. Play number 5 would be outbound to the network of the VC partners. So in this case scenario, I would go to Doug's LinkedIn page and I would look through all of his mutual connections and say, I am, prospecting into Twilio, for instance. And Doug is connected with Mark Borditsky, who's the SVP, or he's the now CRO of Twilio. And so let's say Doug was connected to him on LinkedIn. I would say like, hey, Doug, do you actually know him? And like, is there any way that we can, that I could leverage your relationship or, ghostwrite something for you, or I could, reach out to him and mention your name, et cetera. But you get, I'm not going to go into the strategy or the messaging in the session, just the play. Number 5 is going to be just, I'm contacting, the connections of Doug Landis, of my VC partner, and reaching out to them based on that premise to open them up. Number 6 is going to be inbound referrals from C-suite. This happens quite often. So let's say, if I'm a CEO of a company, then I want to, talk to my friends and they say like, hey, I want to use Flip the Script. And so I would hypothetically send those leads to my reps and say, hey, let me introduce you to this person because they're saying that they want to use Flip the Script. And so you need to go ahead and, quote unquote, sell them on it. So I was actually talking to a CEO the other day, a very well-known company, and he said he does this all the time. Number 7, outbound to the network of your C-suite. So just like in the Doug Landis example, in this case scenario, I'm going to use Manny Medina over at Outreach, for instance. In case 6, basically Manny would be sending referrals over to his AEs. In case number 7, his AEs would be looking at the network on his LinkedIn and saying, I'm prospecting into PagerDuty. I want to see if Manny's connected to anyone over at PagerDuty so it can make it a little bit of an easier sell. This is actually really helpful for CEOs from what I've seen because, they have a relationship with someone and they don't want to blow them up and say like, hey, you should buy my product. So in this case scenario, you've got someone else who's doing the quote unquote selling, but they also, they have that relationship and they want to sell into them because they're selling a high quality product. So this can be really helpful actually to C-suite. So it doesn't necessarily just have to be the CEO, could be the CRO, CEO over at your company, et cetera, but you get the point. Number 8 is going to be inbound referrals from your advisors. So same kind of play of, my advisor send a lead over to me. Number 9 is going to be outbound to the network of my advisors. You're starting to see a trend. Number 10, inbound referrals from the board of directors. Number 11, outbound to the network of the board of directors. I'm going to go through their connections on LinkedIn and see if I can, really cook the fish for them or fry the fish for them and bring it to deck and say, hey, you're connected with these 3 people. Can you make an intro? Number 12, inbound referrals from your customer advisors. So to all of those out there who are like, what the heck is a customer advisor? A lot of hypergrowth tech companies that I've seen, they are making some of their best customers their advisors because they're people who are buying their product and using their product. So inbound referral from a customer advisor is number 12. Number 13, so a great example of this is Jake Rennie over at Tiled. He was using Chorus, and so he was a customer advisor, and he was really helpful in terms of our product of like, okay, how is he using it? What improvements would he like to see, et cetera. So case number 12 would be Jake sending over a lead to some of the account executives. Number 13, outbound to the network of Jake Rennie. So I'm going to go to Jake Rennie's profile. He's a customer advisor, and I'm going to scour through and see any of the companies that I'm selling into, is he connected with a decision maker? Number 14, inbound referral from an influencer. A lot of companies are hire influencer marketers. So this would be an influencer sending you over a lead. Number 15, outbound to the network of the influencer that you're working with. Number 16, inbound referral from a non-sales employee. The reason I say non-sales employee is because if it's a sales employee and they know the company, they probably very likely will just sell it themselves. So number 16 is going to be, let's say we have a CSM that comes in and they know someone over at a company, and they send it over to the sales team and say like, hey, this person's interested in buying seismic, so you need to go ahead and talk to them. 17 is going to be a little bit of a twist from 16. Let's say it's a non-sales hire that used to work at a company that you're prospecting into. So, let's say that I want to prospect into, HubSpot, and someone just joined on board that came from HubSpot. Let's say in this instance, Mark Roberge, came over and started working at my company, and he used to work at HubSpot, but he is a CSM. So in this case scenario, I'd say like, hey, Mark, do you still have a good relationship, et cetera? Is there any way that you can help me kind of sell into HubSpot from there? Number 18 has 5 different sequences or sales plays, but number 18 is going to be your network. So there are 5 different case scenarios where you can leverage your network to sell into people. So number 1, friends that you have that are past employees at the org you're trying to sell into. So let's say I'm trying to sell into Twilio, and I have a friend that is a former employee of Twilio, and so they have a certain amount of relationship, and so I leverage that to sell into them. Number 2, or 18B, is going to be friends that currently work at an org I'm trying to sell into. So I have a friend over at Twilio that's currently working there, and for lack of better terms, I put groundswell. I know that's probably not too PC, but what I mean by that is they are an individual contributor. So, I have a friend that is a, account executive or an SDR over at Twilio, and so how do I leverage that relationship? They know Mark Boroditsky, or Allison Welch, who is the VP of Engineering Sales. How do I leverage that relationship of, my friend works for Allison Welch, which is who I want to sell into. 18C, which is the third network play, it's going to be friends that currently work at the org you want to sell into who are the decision maker. So a little bit of a difference. In one case scenario, it's how do I multi-thread using my friend? The next case scenario is my friend is a decision maker, which is really, really nice, really convenient. So how do I sell into them knowing that I need to sell into Twilio? The fourth case scenario, which is 18D, is friends that you have that are connected to the decision maker over at Twilio. So let's say I have a friend or at an org that you want to sell into. So let's stick with Twilio. Let's say I want to sell into Allison Welch. She's a VP of Engineering Sales, and shout out Allison if you're watching this. She's absolutely lethal and amazing, one of the smartest people I've come across in the industry. Anywho, let's say I have a friend that is connected to Allison, and I don't know Allison myself. How can I leverage that friend's connection, or can my friend make an introduction to Allison so that I can run my dog and pony show and try and pitch her? And then the last case scenario is prospects who have interacted with you on LinkedIn. So the difference between this and interacted with your company, which we've already covered, when they interacted with your company, it's a marketing lead essentially because marketing did the draw there. This last case scenario is prospects who have interacted with you on LinkedIn. So I've seen a lot of different people where I add them on LinkedIn and I want to prospect into them, and I'll even send them prospecting emails. They won't answer my emails or pick up my calls, and they'll start interacting with my stuff on LinkedIn. So what is the play there, and what is the playbook to basically sequence these people to get them to take a meeting? And then the last 3 here, number 19, this prospects who you met at a networking event. So again, we're during a pandemic right now, but eventually there are going to be networking events that pop up again. And one of the things I used to do is go to these networking events, to try to meet people that I could currently sell into. So let's say I sell into salespeople. It's like I want to go up to any kind of meetup, and like Modern Sales Pro is running some kind of networking event, which they are very, very good at. I want to go to that networking event because I want to meet other VPs of sales because I sell into salespeople. And so it'd be really nice if I have a relationship with them. So that's what play 19 is. Number 20 is you interacted with a non-sales, someone who interacts with non-sales employees at your org on social media. So let's say, I have a CSM, who works at my current org at Flip the Script. And I look online and I see that I'm trying to sell into Twilio. I see that Allison Welch over at Twilio, basically is commenting back and forth with this CSM over at my org. So I don't know what the relationship is, but I know that Allison somehow knows my CSM. So how can I go to my CSM and leverage that relationship to, to sell into her? And then the last one is going to be competitors of your current clients. Again, this is an exhaustive list of plays. This is not necessarily plays that I love or recommend. And I say that in context. I think that you can pick up what I'm saying. A lot of orgs run this play. Whatever. I'm not going to put my opinions on camera, but, true to form. But number 21 is going to be competitors of your current clients of like you just signed, for instance, I'm not going to name competitors, but you just signed company number 1 and their chief competitor is company number 2. And so am I going to leverage that to say, hey, company 1 just bought us. Do you want to buy us too? So I see a lot of sales orgs run this. And again, I'm going to shut my mouth and just move on to the next category. So that is all of the 21 essentially plays that you can run for bridge bound based on relationship. So again, bridge bound based on relationship is just going to be someone knows knows someone at your company or knows of your company or shares a common VC, et cetera. But there's some level of relationship with the company that you're trying to prospect into. So how do I leverage that to get a meeting? So again, that's going to increase the likelihood that they will take a meeting. If I know your CEO, then out of respect, I'm probably going to, jump on a call because I'm not going to turn them down, out of respect for them. However, it doesn't necessarily increase the likelihood that they are going to buy because you don't know if they have the pain, problem, et cetera, or in the place where they're ready to buy software. Number 2 is going to be bridge bound based on history. So again, bridge bound is middle right, and this is the second category underneath bridge bound that will raise the likelihood that people will take a meeting, but not necessarily that they will buy your product. So let's jump in. So bridge bound based on history. The first play that you can run is people who have requested a demo, but did not actually schedule a demo. Sounds crazy. A lot of the orgs, I'd say most of the orgs that I've seen, out of all the people who requested a demo, somewhere between 15 to 25% of those people actually make it into a demo. Jarring. Let's assume that 35% of the people who requested a demo aren't qualified. It's not someone who we wanted to talk to. This is, some relative level. This is inbound, right? So you can't really call your shot necessarily. But that still gives us a delta of anywhere from 30 to 50% of people who requested a demo that didn't actually get one who were qualified. So the first play is how do I, from an automation perspective, scoop behind and say anyone who requested a demo but didn't actually schedule one. Again, I would go to season 1. I would, look at the demo request process session there. I can't remember exactly what number it is, where I go into how to convert more of these. But point being, play number 1 is going to be requested a demo, but they didn't actually schedule one. Number 2, close lost. And in this case scenario, I'm going to say it's close lost because I got a definite answer from the prospect as to why. So we're going to go into what happens if you don't get an answer as well. But close lost category 2, to me, and this is going to be the shot heard around the world, I think there are only really 4 case scenarios for close lost. Number 1, close lost, they went with a competitor and they're up on renewal. This can be a really great play. If like, okay, someone went with my competitor and 10 months from now, from an automation perspective, I want to pipe them through to the sequence because I want to check in with them. How did the first 10 months go? Did they have a great interaction? Did they have a great experience? Did they get the outcome they were trying to solve for whenever they bought the product? That one can be a really, really, really effective play. But they bought a software for a certain reason. Are they getting that actual reason alleviated by buying that software? So, play number 1 for close loss is they went with a competitor and they told you that, and they are up on renewal. So I was very granular in terms of, in my CRM, of decline reasons. Because not only do I want to measure when I'm losing, why am I losing, but I also want to be able to segment these users so that from an automation perspective, the strength of a system like this is essentially you want to automate based on this. So most of VPs of sales have thought of these plays. Like, I didn't come up with these plays, I have seen these plays. But the strength behind a system is that you can automate it so that you don't have to think about, oh, you know what? In 10 months, I'm going to set a calendar reminder to remind myself that I just lost this deal competitively and I want to sequence them and talk to them based on it. So this is a system that essentially will turn you into a lethal org because it's operationalizing all of the plays that people have already thought of that I did not come up with, that you just want to add some level of operation to. So close lost, went with a competitor and up on renewal. Close lost and didn't hit ICC. ICC standing for Ideal Customer Company. So in case number 2, it's going to be a size issue. So, they didn't hit ICC in terms of they were too small. Like, they didn't have a big enough sales team. They requested a demo, and they came in, but they did not actually hit the size of who I currently sell into, hit that bar. So can I segment them in my CRM? Can I make them a finite group? And then in my CRM, I would say for anyone who has this tag that says that they didn't hit ICC, their close loss didn't hit ICC, whenever their employee count with my data vendor goes above, let's say, I don't sell into anyone with less than 100 employees, and then they tick up from 99 to 100 employees, from an automation perspective, I would have my CRM kick that lead through to outreach to say, hey, if someone didn't have a big enough team size and now all of a sudden they do, I want you to send them through to this sequence so that I can use them. Sorry, I just got goosebumps thinking about the ops of this. But basically, I want to sequence them and I want you to pipe them through from an automation view so that I want to call on them whenever they are big enough. So I hope that you treated them well the first time around whenever they weren't big enough, because we are much like elephants. We remember how people treated us whenever we were tiny. So then when we're big enough, we still have that image in our mind. Close loss 2C, which is going to be the third close loss, is they didn't hit ICC, which is Ideal Customer Company, in terms of qualifying criteria. So case number 2, it was they weren't substantial enough, big enough for us to sell into. Case number 3 is going to be they didn't have this one variable that prevents me from selling into them. So let's start with an example. Let's say that I am only selling into people who have a certain tech stack, which is very common, especially in B2B SaaS. And let's say that they don't currently have that tech stack. So I could go into my CRM and basically say, hey, this person, had this tech stack that we don't support. And I would have a drop-down menu that says, what tech stack did they have? And I would put in that piece, so then whenever we do have that integration, whenever the product team comes in and says, hey, we have that new tech stack integration, I essentially want a short list from an automation view of all the people who are interested in us and basically didn't have that tech stack because they had an adjacent one that we didn't support. So again, these 3 plays can all 3 be automated, which is what makes them lethal. Your reps don't have to think about, how to do this or when to do this or keep that in their mind. They want to do these plays, but they just don't have it in front of them. So how can I sequence based on that? And then the last category is you messed up. That's it. Those are the only reasons. So number 3, the difference being in number 2, they are giving you a definite answer. And number 3, they demoed in the past, but they ghosted or went dark. For all of my sellers out there, my heart goes out to you because these are the most common. However, someone going dark is not a reason. You messed up somewhere. I've been there. I wrote the postcard on it. But essentially, those are the only examples of, they either went with a competitor, they weren't the right size, they didn't have some qualifying criteria that you simply, you absolutely needed to sell into them. But the only other category is you messed up somewhere in the selling process. So keep in mind, however, it's industry average is 20% conversion. So we are lifelong losers in sales. So if we can get that percentage to 35, then we're a Hall of Famer, right? And that means that 65% of the time we lose makes us a Hall of Famer. But 2D, and 3 is just you messed up somewhere. You didn't do good enough discovery. You didn't tease something out. You didn't drive value. You didn't drive urgency. But a couple of the examples that they'll give you, language that they'll say to you if you have messed up somewhere in the sales process, is no budget or bad timing are two of the examples. So if someone, asking someone if they have budget, it's kind of like asking a little kid if they are hungry after dinner. They say no, and then you say, I have ice cream, and they say, I'll make room. So if you've driven enough value for your prospect, they will find the budget somewhere. I would pause it. So 2D is just you messed up. And then number 3 is you demoed in the past and they ghosted or went dark. So the reason they're different plays is because, or I listed them out different in different plays, is because there's a different playbook that I would run in each one of these case scenarios. If someone it ghosted me, what is the playbook there? Versus someone told me bad timing, what is the playbook there? So I'm listing out all of these plays in terms of, when are they different and what kind of, when are they different in terms of the playbook that I would run on them. Number 4, executive churn. So this is actually a great play. Shout out User Gems if they are watching this. They are actually a platform that can help you with executive churn. So executive churn, simply defined, is prospects who are changing jobs. So 3 case scenarios where this can be very, very useful to you. Number 1 is they used your product at a past company and then they went to a company that you're trying to prospect into. The great thing about this play is these are people who know your value prop. If you've done a good job, you added a lot of value and really liked your product, and so it can make it a super easy sale. I don't remember the statistic, but it's around 85%, I believe. Don't quote me on this, even though it's on record. It's around 85% of the process and tech decisions for a leader are made within the first 90 days. Somewhere around that realm. But an aggressive amount of their decisions, especially from a purchasing standpoint, are made within the first 90 days. So usually the theory goes that if someone, is coming within an organization, they're going to bring their tech stack and their people in with them. So people who have used your product, who are moving into a company that you actually want to sell into, this can be a very lethal play, but it all comes down to automation. How quickly and how much in an automated way can you get this done? Most people want to run this play, but don't have the automation infrastructure to support it. So it can become very ad hoc. So I would always suggest, User Gems is a great platform to do that. But there needs to be some kind of process of when someone changed jobs that has already used your product, especially if they were really, really happy. The second play for executive churn is people who have used your product and changed jobs internally. So let's say I sold into LinkedIn to marketing solutions, and my decision maker all of a sudden changed to talent solutions division, who we haven't sold into. So this can be a great opportunity to say, enterprise only buys typically for one segment, and typically on a small group of users. So how do I leverage that? Number 1, in expansion selling to sell to more users. And then number 2, if they change jobs, I want to talk to them within the first 90 days because I want to see, especially if they had a great experience, with me in marketing solutions, I want to cross-sell into the talent solutions division. 4C is going to be people who never used your product, but they went to a role at a prospective company. So again, people are going to do a lot of purchasing of tech stack in the first, especially year of their tenure at a company, whether they've used you or not. So this can be a really, really great trigger time to say, run some kind of playbook of, notice that you just started there, some of the things that we saw for in onboarding, some of the things that we saw for at XYZ and hunt for pain. But typically people are open to purchase whenever they first start a new role. So I'll give you a great example. When I first started Flip the Script, I was in purchasing mode. I need, a videography team, the wonderful videography team that I'm working with right now. I need someone who's going to design the website. I need someone who's going to work the back end for me. I need, some level of CRM. I need, on and on and on. I need a content management system like HubSpot. So I was in purchasing mode because it was a new role for me. I mean, now that was a new company, but it's still the same level of thing of if a new leader comes in, they usually come in with a different set of ideas than the previous existing leader. And so they need a different set of tech stack to support that. Number 5 is going to be people who have opened your prospecting emails. So I will not tell you the play that I won't bore you with the details of the play that I run there, but I have a playbook for people who are opening your emails. Within Outreach, actually, you can set a task that basically anyone who opens your email, you want to flood into your task home screen, which can be really helpful. Number 6 is going to be people who aggressively open to your prospecting emails. The reason that I listed them differently is someone who opened one email, it's like, I want to talk to them right now because it's top of mind for them of the email that I sent to them. So I'm going to run some level of playbook that, again, I won't bore you with the details. I want to call them right away and maybe the next day. Number 6 is someone who has opened my emails, and what I define as aggressive is like somewhere around 10 to 15 over, or more. So if someone's opening my email that amount of times, it typically means one of two things. They either open to my email and they send it to my competitor because they're friends with my competitor or they're using my competitor. Or number 2, which I've seen done a lot, especially if you are personalizing your messaging, is they take your email and they send it to their entire sales team and they say, this is a great example of a personalized email. This is someone who really knew me. This is someone who, did their research, did their homework. Everyone needs to write emails like this one. I'm going to take a meeting with the person. And then they don't actually take the meeting with the person because they made the promise to someone who is not in the room just to get their team to go ahead and do something. So the play that I run here, won't bore you with the details yet, but the play that I would run here, is effectively 2 very different case scenarios of someone who opened my email once and someone who opened it 21 times. There's going to be a different level of playbook in these case scenario. But both of them, they have history, with your company. And then number 7, vendors who you just sold into. So again, I'm not going to say whether I like plays. I only bring that up for the plays I don't like. But I'm not going to say whether I like the play. But let's say that I had just purchased Drift, at my organization, and all of a sudden I have the temerity and wine cooler courage to say like, oh, well, Drift should buy us because I just bought Drift. So this is a play I see very commonly run, unfortunately, in B2B SaaS, but this is, a play that I wanted to put on the board. So that is all of the plays in Bridgebound based on history. So again, in review, Bridgebound based on relationship and Bridgebound based on history increases the likelihood that they will take a meeting, but does not necessarily increase the likelihood that they will purchase your software. So let's go to category 3. So again, in review, Bridgebound based on relationship and history, categories 1 and 2, increase the likelihood that someone will take a meeting, but not necessarily that they will ultimately buy. If I know a CEO and I am an effective leader, that I'm going to take the meeting because I know that CEO. However, I'm going to be very, very truthful to myself of, do I have the pain and problem that this tool alleviates? Because the most effective leaders that I know are the ones who don't buy necessarily based on emotion and don't buy something that they don't need. They don't spend budget there. So in the first and second case scenario, Bridgebound based on relationship and history, maybe they have the pain that you're looking to solve, maybe they don't. But it increases the likelihood that they'll jump into a meeting, but not necessarily that they have the pain that you seek to alleviate with your product. The second category is going to increase the likelihood that they will ultimately buy. I'm very, very, very excited for these 2 categories because ultimately we want to take into a meeting the people who have the pain that we're looking to solve, have the problems that we're looking to solve for. And how I've seen people historically do this is they book a meeting with someone and they try to, in their elevator pitch, talk about problem or pain, or in the beginning discovery stages, in the nascent stages of the conversation, in the discovery, they try to hint around for pains and problems. But there is a way to sequence them based on that. So the third category is going to be Bridgebound. I'm almost like blushing because how excited I am about this content. It's going to be Bridgebound based on symptoms, pains, and problems. Before we go into these examples and the plays that you can run, know that this needs to be, you can tell some level of pain or problem externally. because again, you're going to need to be sequencing these people based on this. So it needs to be a level of factor externally that you can see that you don't need to talk to them to ascertain. Because everyone already, this is not groundbreaking, is looking for pain and problem within their meeting. And everyone already should be, looking at pitching in their elevator pitch, based on pain and problems that they look to alleviate. That's what drives urgency with people. So that's nothing new. But putting people into a sequence and actually trying to get in front of people that have the pain that you're looking to alleviate is new. I've never seen it done before, and so I want to unpack the different plays that you can do based on this third category. Very, very excited. This is probably my favorite category. So number one, prospects who left a negative review of your competitor on some kind of third-party review site. So this can be an absolute goldmine. So people who left a negative review of your competitor, let's say on G2, great third-party review site. If they left a negative review of your competitor, you know that there are actually two pains and problem. Number one, they had a problem or pain so deep that they bought someone to do something about it. They bought a software or a platform to help alleviate some pain or problem. You're not positive what that pain or problem is, but you know that there is one deep enough that they decided to buy a vendor to alleviate that. Number two, you also know that they have the pain or problem of when they bought that vendor, they did not get the outcome that they were looking to achieve. So I was looking to, go from running a 9-minute mile to running a 6-minute mile. So I bought a training coach. I had the pain and the problem. I didn't know how to do that. And then I'm leaving a negative review because that, training coach only got me down to, let's say, a 7:30 mile. So I'm looking to achieve something. And so I had the pain or problem present. You know that. And you also know that they didn't get alleviated with your competitor. So I never suggest, full disclosure, mudslinging against your competitors. What Sarah says about Sally says more about Sarah than Sally. However, this is a great bucket of people who definitely have the pain or problem that you are looking to solve for, especially if it was a recent review and a recent churn. Number two, people who churn customers of your competitors. This is relatively the hardest to automate. However, there is a way to do it. There are different platforms. I won't go into all the details. ZoomInfo, DataFox, etc. Crunchbase, who can, G2 Track is another way to do it, who can tell you the tech stack of companies. So, G2 Track, for instance, let's say, I actually worked for them, so I can with clean heart pitch them. They would give you, for no money, essentially the list of the tech stack that they thought that company had based on data. They also could tell you a trigger event of, let's say, I want to know if they have integrated with my competitor. I want to know the trigger of when they have disintegrated with my competitor. And I want to use that to send through to a sequence. So this sequence can be automated. If people are using my competitors, I want to use a data tool to tell me technographic setup of the rules if-then statement. If they're using my competitor, which is X, and they disintegrate with that competitor, I want you to send that through to the CRM and pipe it through to my outreach instance so that into this actual workflow, so that I know that this is a list of people who very recently churned from my main competitor. Absolutely lethal. They churned for a reason. Maybe it was they lost budget, but again, with the no budget, it's like they weren't seeing the value. So this can be a very, very healthy category of people who, were using some product of your competitor, and people love the rip and replace, steal stories, etc. But this can be a good category of people who are looking, they had the pain or problem that your category was looking to solve for. They purchased another competitor, and they obviously didn't get everything that they wanted. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gotten rid of it. Number three is going to be act of God. So an act of God sequence is when a overwhelming variable comes into play that all of a sudden gives everyone gives a group of people, usually a large group of people, a pain point to alleviate. So I'll give you a great example. COVID just hit, unfortunately. And all of a sudden, you saw sales orgs across the globe have to pivot from selling in person and with a handshake and with, I'm meeting someone face to face and calling on them, to completely digital. I need to sell via some kind of platform, either a dialer. I need to learn how to call. I need to learn how to set up these meetings, and I need to learn how to sell in a remote environment. So I think, the theory goes that COVID sped up the digital transformation about 7 years, because all of a sudden people in the first couple of months, they thought like, oh, this is, kind of different and we're really getting adapted here. Around months 6, 7, and 8, they're like, this is here to stay for a little while, so we need to do something about this in the meantime. So an act of God sequence would be, if I was selling Zoom, for instance, all of a sudden people have a very, very big need for my product because I'm a remote selling platform, or even for school districts. So in this case scenario, I have an observed symptom, pain, or problem that all of a sudden the market really, really needs my platform. So in this case scenario, I probably would run a one-to-many strategy only. You don't need to personalize. You just need to get in front of people. So right around March of 2020 or April of 2020, if I was selling Charmin toilet paper, it wasn't like I got better at selling. And it wasn't like I necessarily had to deploy that level of skill. All I needed to do was learn how to pass out toilet paper and take the money. So this is a kind of sequence that you would run whenever a very, a high amount of people all of a sudden need your product. There is a, external factor that drove an inorganic need for your product. And what is the sequence in play there? So those are the first 3. However, there is a second set of 6. And this is what I am very, very excited about. So there are 3 kinds of external factors that you can look for with your prospects. Number 1 is going to be a business impact. Number 2 is going to be a lagging indicator. And number 3 are going to be variables. So let's dig in here. The first way that you can sequence your prospects based on symptoms, pains, or problems is there is a presence of a negative output from a business impact perspective. And I'll give you an example. I sell sales consulting and sales training. So if I were to sequence all of the public companies who missed their Q3 projections into a sequence, I could say, I don't know if they need sales training. I don't know if they're selling effectively, but they just missed their business impact. They were supposed to hit 5 million, 10 million, 15 million, 20 million. If they're public, it's higher than that, ARR. And they instead hit, instead of 50 million ARR, they hit 30. So I don't know if they need help for sales training, but I'm assuming based on they missed their business impact, something is wrong within the business. So I don't know, I would not have the temerity probably. I'm not going to go into the messaging, but just as a little asterisk mark to prevent people from unnecessary pain, I would not lead by saying, hey, notice that you missed your Q3 numbers. Notice that you biffed really, really hard. You want to talk to me? Because I can help you with that. So I'd be very, very tenuous in this language. And I would also flirt with thinking of the idea of like, I'm just going to talk about personalization. I'm going to be the right person at the right time. And, they're looking for a popsicle and I am suddenly there with popsicles. But this is a great way to sequence people of, they miss their business impact. There's a presence of a negative output. And so I want to reach out to them right now because based on what I'm seeing from an output perspective, they might be in the market. So I typically use some level of weight loss examples. So you have to pardon the cheesy analogy. But, in this case example, it's like, okay, this person has a little bit of weight on them, a little bit of insulation on them. So I don't know if they're in the market for a trainer. However, the business impact is there. So it's likely to think that they might be. Number 5 is the absence of a positive output. So in terms of business impact. So there are certain case scenarios where you can say like, okay, there's no presence of a negative output. But typically when people are doing very well, they're vocal about it. So there is no necessarily like positive output on market that I'm seeing. So, a lot of times you'll see people celebrating that they hit their Q4 number, or they hit their accelerators, et cetera. So in the weight loss example, this would be, typically when people have a really, really great body that they're proud of, you'll go to their Facebook account and you'll see pictures of them at the beach in a bathing suit because they want to show it off because it's really hard to do. So in this case scenario, it would be, I don't know if they're in the market for a trainer, but I don't see any pictures of them on Facebook. So it's, maybe it's likely to think that they might have some level of need for a trainer. So, in the sales example, it would be, I don't see all of these LinkedIn posts about how the team is killing it. I don't see any of this, vocal projection of, oh, we hit our numbers, et cetera, which typically, if a team is doing well, they tend to be vocal about it, about they just hit their spiff, they just hit their stretch goal. And so I don't see any of those posts. So, I think that they might be in the market for sales training because they're struggling a little bit. Number 6 is going to be a presence of a negative midput or a lagging indicator. So we have outputs, we've got inputs, and we got midputs. Yes, I did make the word up. So I'll give you a good example of this. A lot of times I will, in the consulting world, solve for inbound lines. So people ask me like, hey, I want you to train my team on objection handling or cold calling. And I'm like, okay, well, industry average via Topo research and Bridge Group research is that you're making anywhere from 35 to 40 cold calls per day. Okay, and out of that will yield around 3 to 4 actual connects. And let's say, for instance, that you have a 20% conversion rate and you're bringing me in to teach some kind of objection handling hook that will take your reps. Let's say they ascertain it. Let's say that I have buy-in. Let's say that they can remember it. Let's say they deploy it really, really well on the spot. We'll take them from 20 to 25% conversion. So since there's only 3 connects per day, that takes me from I booked, 0.6 of a meeting to afterwards 0.75 of a meeting if I went from 20 to 25%. So companies are looking for more than just 0.6 of a meeting per day to 0.75 a meeting per day. They need the needle to be moved more than that. So one of the things that I solve for is the inbound line because, from what I've seen, it's anywhere from 15 to 25% conversion of people who request a demo that actually make it into a demo. So I'm going to start there and get you your results there. And then let's back into the bar napkin math of let's do the objection handling afterwards because I want to help you in both areas. So a lagging indicator would be if I went to someone's website and I requested a demo and it took me 3 weeks to get an actual demo from that platform. I don't know if they have problems. I don't know if they are churning users based on this. I don't know, necessarily if their numbers are low of how many people are requesting a demo that are making it into a demo. But based on my experience, it's likely to guess that they are. So 6 is going to be a presence of a negative midput in terms of lagging indicator. I tested out this company based on the variable that I solve for, to look like if it's a sales tech process, and I'm selling sales training, I want to see how the selling process was whenever I bought this software. So I can say like, hey, here are the things that negatively affected the sale or the absence of a positive midput. I tried to buy a, platform and the selling process wasn't that great. Wasn't terrible, but I didn't walk away feeling like I was really heard, understood. Like I bought the product in spite of the salesperson. So in these 2 case scenarios, it's going to have to be experiential. Experiential? That's a word. And I would go to these companies and basically look for whatever, I see CEOs talk about this a lot, look for whatever variable you solve for and say, how is my experience as a consumer? So it's likely to think if it was negative or it wasn't overwhelmingly positive, that I could sell into them based on that using data of like, hey, I just went through this process and we help companies X, Y, and Z. So that's a midput for a lagging indicator. And then number 8 and 9 is the same exact framework except for a negative input and a positive input. So let's go back to the weight loss example. In case scenario number 8, there's a presence of a negative input. That means that I go over to someone's house and I see a bunch of Oreos everywhere, and that's all I see. So I don't know what they're eating, but I see them eating Oreos all the time, and I see them eating ice cream all the time, or I know that they're taking that to their lunchbox. So I don't know if they're in the market for a weight loss trainer. However, the inputs aren't looking good. If someone just eats Oreos all day long, sorry Oreo, if you're watching this, if they eat Oreos all day long, then it might lead to a negative outcome on the back end. So again, you're looking for a negative input. And number 9, absence of a positive input. So this would be, I'm going to their fridge and I'm not seeing any vegetables. So I'm not seeing anything at all. So I don't know what they're eating, but if someone has no food at their house, then they're probably going out to eat a lot. And if they're going out to eat a lot, it's likely to think that maybe they're not eating that healthily. Sorry to restaurants everywhere who are watching this. So I don't know what their weight looks like, or if they are in the market for a trainer, but likely to guess, if they're not eating fruits and veggies, they're eating something, so it might not be all that positive. So these are the 6 sequences. It's presence of a negative and absence of a positive in all case scenarios, and therefore business impact, lagging indicator, and presence of a negative for variables and inputs on the back end. So these, for instance, within sales training, and then I'll move on. In sales training, this would be, let's say, someone had just hired 25 sales reps, no sales enablement person, only 1 leader, and not a lot of tech. I don't know if they're in trouble, but I kind of do. If I have 1 person running 25 salespeople with no tech or sales enablement and no ops person, then they probably are feeling some pain, and there's going to be some negative outputs on the back end. So that is all of Bridgebound based on symptoms, pains, and problems. And again, you have to be searching for external factors that you can then segment people into based on a sequence. So, you can tease out whatever those variables are for your company. And then from a CRM perspective, say, if a company has this many sales employees, and has only one leader, only 1 VP, and they don't have this amount of tech stack, I want to sequence everyone into that category who hits those 3 in the CRM, within a data perspective, so I can solve for it. The 4th and last category of Bridgebound is going to be Bridgebound based on an educated guess that they are in market. So before you hit me with, what about buyer intent? You mentioned G2 and trust radius earlier. So buyer intent for G2 and trust radius is a great way to know if they're probably likely in market, but that's a marketing lead. So that makes it postbound. So Bridgebound is going to be basically non-marketing leads that we are finding some kind of educated guess that this person is in market. And there are 5 sequences to this. Number 1, a channel play. So typically, if people are in the market, let's say they are going to start to run a marathon, they're going to buy new running shoes, and they're going to buy new running shirts and pants. So let's say, that I am selling running shirts and pants. Okay, I want a short list of all of the people who are buying running shoes. Because if they bought shoes, it's likely that they would be in market also for these running pants and shirts. So a channel play, within B2B tech would be like, I am selling, I'm a data provider. So I want to sequence people for all the people who just bought a sales engagement tool. Because if they bought a sales engagement tool like Outreach, then they need to fill it with prospects. So if they bought Outreach, then they probably, need some contact email addresses and phone numbers. So the channel play would not be you're collaborating. That's a different story for a different time. This is not that you are collaborating with the vendor. This is, I want to surface everyone who just integrated from a technographic standpoint, Outreach, because I am a, data provider. And so anyone who bought sales engagement, I want to pipe through those leads because they're probably a market for people of how to fill Outreach with their prospects. Number 2, they're evaluating a competitor. This is the only play that is impossible to automate. very, very worth it. Very, very great play, but it's extremely hard to understand. So, I mean, you can't know if someone's really evaluating other than you just hear it through the grapevine. That's the only case scenario that I know. But this can be really, really great play because it can be a competitive steal. And it also can be, you didn't put in the effort of all the discovery and meetings that competitor had beforehand, and you're essentially cherry picking right off the end and saying how you're different and then, pulling them in. But this is a very, very lucrative play if you can find out the people who are evaluating your competitors. And number 3, 3, 4, and 5 are all going to be firmographic triggers. So these can be sourced through Crunchbase. Shout out Crunchbase if you're watching this. So firmographic trigger number 1 is all of the companies that just IPO'd. So this is a very common play of when people IPO, a lot of times they need to get leaner, a little bit leaner, and make sure that all of their process and tech stack is correct, because now they're public and everyone's watching their numbers, and then they need to grow. So companies that IPO, you can sequence them of, hey, I want all of the companies from an automation perspective that IPO'd over the last, in real time, that companies that IPO period, Zoom Info just IPO'd. Congrats, Henry Scheck, if you're watching this. And I want to shoot him through, to a sequence because he just IPO'd. So, chances are he's in the market for tech. So PagerDuty or Slack, they IPO'd. Snowflake, congratulations, Snowflake. I want to shoot all those organizations into a sequence, and I want to get in front of them, because they just went public. Number 4, firmographic trigger based on company funding. So again, I am just stating the plays that are here. I see this one done a lot, but basically people who just raise money, the theory goes that they want to spend that money. And so you can sequence them based on it. And then the last one is going to be number 5, firmographic trigger based on hypergrowth. So you can define what hypergrowth means for your team of, I want, people, anyone who's hiring, the 50 people over the last, couple of weeks or month, et cetera. I'm going to define that as hypergrowth. So Crunchbase, any kind of, companies that have acquired 50 new salespeople over the last month, I want to sequence them in there because they probably need some level of training if they're growing that quickly. So Uber is a great example of this. Overnight, they had to quadruple, sextuple, 10x, 15x, 20x in size. And so because there's a lot of demand. So all of a sudden they needed process and people and tech stack like now, like yesterday. And so, any kind of company like this, they're going to be looking for people who can enable them, sometimes regardless of the price tag. So it can be a really, really easy way to get a hold of someone. So that is all 4 categories of bridge bound. There's only one more play. So in review, inbound was far left, and that is hand raisers. Postbound is middle left, and that is marketing leads that are non-hand raisers. Middle right is going to be bridge bound, and that is a way to bridge into your prospects using a one-to-many premise along with a one-to-one premise. And then cold outbound is far right. So cold outbound is just someone you have no segmented reason. They haven't interacted with any of your marketing material. They haven't come inbound, but you still want to talk to them. There's only one sequence under it, and it's cold outbound. That's all there is to it. So, people say that outbound isn't cold. Well, there can be cold outbound. If I want to talk to Twilio and they haven't hit any of those other plays, then okay, I'm going to put them into this play. And I always am married to data of which play is working the most effectively. Sometimes, this play, maybe this is the most lucrative play for your team. But this is the only, I would say, common play among all organizations, unless you're not doing outbound, and shout out to you. You must have a wicked great inbound line. So let's go into premise pairing, and then we'll finish out this session. Premise pairing, I'm going to go into 2 case scenarios. Number 1, a strategy, how you can incorporate personalization and relevance. And then a second strategy, if you want to go relevance only. So the 5 premise buckets, I'm going to be very brief here. In the core session, I believe it's 5. I go into personalization at scale and go much more deeply into this. But there are 5 different buckets of personalization that you can do. And again, personalization is defined as a one-to-one premise, meaning you cannot repeat that premise to a second person. So the first bucket, and this is in terms, in order of the plays that will work the best down to the ones that will work the least. Number 1 is self-authored content. any kind of content that your prospect authored. So webinars, articles, posts that they made, etc. Number 2, engage content, any kind of content that they engaged with but didn't author themselves, anything they liked or shared or commented on. Number 3, self-identified traits. I feel like Vanna White. Number 3, self-identified traits. So this is going to be things that they said about themselves on LinkedIn. So company line, profile line, and headline. Number 4, juncture. So this is going to be any kind of really non-business related item. So about them, schools attended, personal interests, hobbies, recommendations, skill endorsements. I always say the asterisk mark is whatever personalized premise you pick, you need to hook to relevant. So I wouldn't just pick that I love Taylor Swift unless you're ready to justify how your product relates to Taylor Swift, which if you have one, call me. Number 5, company level data. M&A, posts, blogs, hiring, website language. But this is going to be anything that's specific to the company that they work for. And I'd say more detailed, but the more brief, the better. The only reason this is in personalization is because it's personalized to the company that they work for. And I would suggest using like actual language from their website. But this is arguably a relevance because you can segment to several other users. So if I'm using a personalization strategy in the inbound case scenario, the dark blue boxes are the boxes that you can automate. A lot of people ask me if AI could replace SDRs. If you're automating the messaging, yes, I could. I don't need a person to do that. But the light blue boxes are the personalized fields. So, I want to push people to start using all of those wonderful cerebral calories that they have in their brain and how can they be creative and be one-to-one messaging. But basically within a personalized strategy, in the first case scenario for inbound, again, it's one-to-many only. You don't need to use a personalized strategy for someone who requested a demo. They're coming to you. So I would say, reason for my outreach is I saw that you requested a demo. Also, while I have you here, I thought you might like this content, that we of how we X, Y, and Z. How's Thursday at 2? And you're giving them the calendar link. Number 2 is going to be postbound. So this is the non-hand-raising marketing lead, where you're going to sandwich in relevance, one-to-many premise, and you're going to sequence based on that. But then you're also going to incorporate one-to-one messaging. So what that would look like is, hi, Keenan. Reason for my outreach is I noticed you downloaded Selling to the C-Suite, but more importantly, I saw you wrote this article whenever you were talking about gap selling and all the, current state, future state, and root causes. So I was curious to know if you have come across Flip the Script before. So essentially you're going to state, you can automate the dark blue box of the postbound premise, of what content they downloaded for your reps. You can automate the language, but more importantly, and then you can land on the light blue language that they would have to fill in themselves of what personalized premise, what article that they wrote, article that they engage with, or self-identified trait, etc. Are they, do they have that I can then relate back to my product? Number 3, bridge-bound. It's the same exact strategy as postbound. Reason for my outreach is I noticed that we share a common VC. Not to be all, hey, we share a common VC, want to buy my stuff. More importantly, I saw that you wrote this article on LinkedIn where you're talking about X, Y, and Z. So dark blue you can automate and sequence based on. Light blue you can't. It needs to be an actual person doing it. And then for the last category for cold outbound, I would go personalized premise summary. And again, in this case scenario, you have no one-to-many premise. So I'd go personalized premise summary, one line in specific. You can automate this language. That's why it's in dark blue. You can write that in. And then personalized premise excerpt. So reason for my outreach is I saw you wrote this article. This is one-to-one only. You have no one-to-many premise. So it's reason for my outreach is I saw you wrote this article. One line in specific that stood out to me was it all comes down to scaling. So that is for personalization. If you want to go relevance only, find another trainer. Just kidding. I'll give you some relevance only strategy. No, I think personalization is the wave of the future. Let's go relevance. So relevance only, show me potato salad. So relevance only, you have 4 different ways to do this. For inbound, I would say the same strategy as you did with personalization because this is one-to-many only. So inbound premise, I noticed that you requested a demo. Also while I have you here, I thought you might like this article. So I'd always be seeking to add value to every step of the way. So this is a great way to warm your prospects up right off the bat. Postbound, and again, they're all dark blue because you can automate all of them. But number 2, the postbound premise, you could say, hey, Keenan, reason for my outreach is I noticed you downloaded Selling to the C-Suite. But more importantly, we work with VPs of sales who X, Y, and Z, and then you're going into the relevance only, and you can go based on buyer persona or industry or all of the relevance. So you're probably going to be limited to the people that you work with or the types of products that you have or problems that you solve, and opening the coat and showing them all your watches and, on and on. However, this is how I'd run a relevant strategy. Number 3, same thing, bridge-bound premise, but more importantly, and then talk about the kinds of people that you work with. And then number 4, again, you can't lean on personalization. So I'd say, hi, Keenan, reason for my outreach is we work with, CEOs just like you and help them take on the world, in specific. And then I would talk about the problems and pains that you solve for. So there's a way to do it within relevance. I always suggest, you take a good hard look at personalization. You're in personalization point, so why not keep continuing it? But, there are a couple of cases that I wouldn't do personalization, and so you're going to have to go to personalization point. I can't remember the episode number, but I go into all the cases where I wouldn't personalize. So the sequence structure, and then we'll finish out. The sequence structure for every single sequence that I do is 16 steps over 21 business days. I'm going to be very brief here. 5 emails, 10 cold calls, 1 LinkedIn research step where I'm teasing out all of this personalization. And essentially for every single sequence that I'm doing, what really changes is, in some of them, the structure changes, but a lot of case scenario, only the language at the beginning of the or the beginning of the email. So essentially when it says, hi, Keenan, reason for my outreach is I noticed you downloaded this article or you downloaded this content, versus hi, Keenan, reason for my outreach is I noticed that you attended this webinar and what webinar he attended. So essentially that is most of the difference. There's a couple other nuances, but just so you get it high level in your mind, if you want to know all of the language that I actually incorporate, if you go to go.reggie.io, I've actually partnered with Reggie and Outreach and several other sales engagement vendors to put all of my language in there, so you can rent the sequences if you want to see all the different language that I do. But this is high level, the sequence structure for most of my sequences that I'm running. So in summary, art is defined as expression with the sole goal of beauty. So I hope that there's no art in sales, because we are in an industry that is an amazing profession, that we need to not only intertwine creativity, but we need to intertwine some level of structure, some level of automation, and some level of operations to support our reps and support our messaging strategy. So when we're winning, we can figure out why we're winning. So I know that this was a very long list of all of the sales plays that you can run. But I'm excited because regardless of what tech stack that you're using, regardless of what industry size you are or industry vertical you are, regardless of what company size you are, these are a litany of plays that you can use within your strategy based on your different buyer personas or based on your different segments to really help figure out, when I'm hitting that home run, what did I do so I can replicate it and I can continue to hit home runs in the future. So I am very, very excited about this because we can finally figure out when we win, why do we win, so we can turn selling back into a game that we can win. So that is everything. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. If you like this session and you want to hear more, go ahead and go to flipthescript.co and you'll see a litany of different sessions on personalization and everything sales and SDR. And if you really like this session, if you do me a favor, go to Flip the Script on LinkedIn, tag me and your top 2 takeaways so I know what you want to hear more of. But either way, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Watch out.